make the we'll make the introduction a little gentle. So as folks continue coming in, maybe post lunch, there'll be room. There won't be a lot to catch up with. Hannah, can you switch to the next slide?
Okay.
So welcome everybody to a presentation on MacGyvering funding sources, creative searching for chaotic times. As we're embarking on what we're going to talk about today, I'd like to invite you all to head into the chat, and as an icebreaker, maybe just let us know how you currently search for or learn about sources of external funding in your field. What are your most important sources there? So, in a larger sense, we put this presentation together in response to some instability at various levels in the funding landscape. But to be honest, the way that we're thinking about MacGyvering or patchworking or cobbling together or whatever you want to call it isn't really, we don't envision it just as relating to external funding. I think it's an approach that can be used productively in a larger sense when we think about faculty professional development. And we're hoping that this presentation offers you some creative motivation, maybe inspires you to think about ways to react to these shifts that involve, certainly there's some concern and a sense of the stakes feeling high, but we're hoping to land somewhere that involves creativity and development as well. Let me back up a second. When I say we, I'm referring to the Faculty Research Development Office. You can see our logo down in the corner of the screen. And just to introduce myself, my name's Andrea Orzoff. I'm a Faculty Research Support Officer, and I'll let my colleague Hannah introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Hannah Yohalem. I'm the Assistant Director for the Faculty Research Development Office.
And Hannah and I will be talking today about some strategic approaches, some creative approaches, we hope, to funding and to thinking about funding in the context of your careers more generally. And then we're also going to try to offer some basic skills for those of you who don't feel comfortable with Pivot or Foundation Directory, some tools that UNM makes available to you for searching for external funding sources. We'll introduce those to you. But we usually use those as a jumping off point, and so we're going to present them to you in that context. Next. Thanks. So what we mean when we're talking about professional development here, this is, of course, a response to the changing federal landscape, but I would say that MacGyvering, patchworking, cobbling together, this is the way that faculty in the humanities, arts, social sciences have always done things. The big, longer term, more lucrative federal awards are less frequent in those fields. And so it's an established methodology and one that maybe everybody could learn from. With regard to the federal funding landscape, and I know Betsy Till from the UNM Foundation is here with us, and Betsy has told us and will tell you that while foundation and corporate funding are trying to fill some of the gaps, there is no way that they will constitute an entire dollar-to-dollar replacement for the changes in federal funding. And so that calls on us to be creative and resourceful. What we want to do here is to support you, to introduce you to new opportunities, to new paradigms, to new strategies. But we want to note that what we intend here is much more extensive than what we hope you're already doing, which is to simply adjusting proposals to match a funder's vision, mission, priorities, language. We hope that you're already doing that you are doing that research into what the funder requires and making sure that your project helps fulfill the funder's mission, or using the funder's language and using and shifting your terminology appropriately. We hope that's already second nature for you. What we're going to propose today is going to go a little bit beyond that. Next slide. So when we talk about creativity or MacGyvering or patchworking, one of the ways that can work is to break your project down into a sequence of discrete steps or these component parts. And the next slide is going to talk about some other ways to do that. But this is just one model. For example, if you have to start with archival research or data collection, if there's a way to find specific funding for that travel or that work, and then to your initial, perhaps less ambitious piece of writing or creation of art or an analysis, then to dissemination grants for conferences, etc., then to maybe a larger sense of where the project is headed in a larger scale publication. And each of these steps can be individually funded. And again, in the humanities, arts, and social sciences, this is a pretty common approach. Next slide. Another way to break this down is in terms of topic, geography, timing, other project elements. But before I get into that, I want to just note the concept of cost share. Not everybody might be familiar with it. I don't want to get too far into that rabbit hole in this presentation because it's not really what we're here to talk about. But the issue of cost share may arise when it comes to dealing with these kinds of components of a larger project. You want to ensure that each of the components that you're addressing when you're seeking funding for them separately are compelling enough to be written aloud in standalone proposals. And we really encourage you to work with an FRSO, Faculty Research Support Officer, in your college or unit, or to contact us in the FRDO in the Faculty Research Development Office. We will send you to the right people to talk about cost share and to make sure that it won't be a problem for you as you break your projects down this way. So one way to break your project, a larger project down, is to do so in terms of topic. For example, if you're talking about the medieval era, you can look for topical awards, smaller awards related to significant elements of that historical period: alchemy, chivalry, the history of capitalism. If you are looking to do work in a particular place, in a particular library, archive, lab, museum, there are often specific awards for that. Project elements like training grants, equipment-focused awards, book completion or subvention, conference planning, and other dissemination-related awards. Hannah will maybe talk about that when she talks about pivot searches and the pivot search fields in a moment or two. And then you can also break apart your larger project into chronological elements, looking for summer salary replacement versus a full semester, or shorter periods as opposed to a full academic year or even 3 to 5 years. Next slide. So when we're thinking about this kind of concern, and we know that this is something that people are struggling with, this question of how do I, on the one hand, keep my scholarship relevant as funding priorities, funding vocabularies shift. And we want to just talk this through with you in ways, again, that we hope relate to creativity more than loss. Can you hit the original research question, Hannah? So if we're starting from a question like this, which now involves some terminology that is regarded as less desirable at the federal level anyway, educational strategies dealing with students from racial or ethnic backgrounds that are traditionally underrepresented in STEM fields, and how to help them graduate college with a STEM degree. There are ways to reframe that allows you to keep your values consistent and to make sure that you are helping, still supporting at least some of the student population that you're interested in. For example, what educational strategies help students from underperforming high schools? graduate college with a STEM degree. Can you hit one more, Hannah? You can reorient your work towards quantum research, which is a stated area of interest at the federal level now. And one more. You can also look at the educational strategies, generally speaking, in K-6 and how those help students succeed at the high school level. So again, this is something of a temporal or chronological shift, but still relevant. Now, just to note, we're not saying that these are interchangeable. Obviously, the work will change, the results will change. These are slightly different groups of students. It, of course, would be possible to draw Venn diagrams and, sketch this out where some of these students would land in multiple categories, but not all of them from the first question would land in all for the newer or possible substitute questions. That said, your knowledge and your expertise that you've developed in previous stages of your career still apply here. They're still relevant and important. Some of the same students are still supported. And so these are just models, just intended as kind of ways to promote your own curiosity and creativity. Questions you could ask yourself, for example. Are you giving up a fundamental piece of this project? And if you are, what are the other ways that might be out there to fund that piece so that your mission, your values, your support of a particular set of students remains consistent? Another set of questions, though, are could this open other relevant or interesting avenues for your research? And another way to think about it, could partnering with someone in your field or in a related field be useful in this process of adaptation? And where might that take you? Again, not just for this one project, but for your career more generally and for the sort of larger arc of your professional development. Next slide. So we've got some strategies here that we've come up with for pivoting. We hope that perhaps we'll have time for a discussion at the end, and perhaps you'll come up with some more and we can crowdsource this. Would you go ahead and hit the first button, Hannah? So one way to think about this is to think about your project in the context of narrative or storytelling. What's the story that you're telling from beginning to end? What are the stakes? What's the arc of that story? And then think either before or after. What's the piece of the process, the part of the story that you don't tell? And could someone else's work related to that part of the story be a useful starting point? Could that work send you in some directions that you hadn't previously considered? And might that be an interesting way to reframe? One possibility. Another way is to think about engaging different groups of people. And that's obviously really broad. We mean it broadly. It could refer to your audience. It could refer to the group that you hope to serve. It could refer to the folks that you're studying. But is there a way to shift populations and in so doing to shift your topic? Could you narrow or expand? Could you, we were talking in the previous slide about pieces of your project. Could those pieces either be excised, added, broken off, addressed differently? Another way to shift is to take a topic that is currently geographically situated and shift it into a more chronological or temporal frame, or vice versa. Quick example from my own work, I'm writing about refugees from Nazism who landed in Latin America before and during the Second World War. And I have been kind of reframing my own work in terms of looking at refugee movements, the Second World War more generally, the Holocaust more generally. So sometimes shifting in and out of those frames can be really generative. Next one. to add elements to your work that are somewhat more applied, a translational or educational element. We mean translational in this context of translational science, with a kind of market-driven or more hands-on element, or alternatively, a pedagogical or classroom-based element. You could also think about your materials using a different methodology. And, for all of this, we're not suggesting that you abandon where you've been. These are really just thought experiments. The next bullet is going to be another one. But so this is a thought experiment. If you think about your materials, swapping the methodologies around. If you are typically if you use quantitative approaches, what other questions could you answer with a qualitative approach, and vice versa? Just give it a try and see where it takes you. And then partnering with folks. And again, we mean this broadly too. That partnering could be with someone in your field who might help you take the work in a different direction. It could also be with someone outside your field, kind of an external funding accountability buddy. And the value there is not just related to revisioning or reimagining your topic or reframing, but could also be useful in terms of producing proposal narratives, which very frequently have at the level of an educated layperson and non-expert in your field, can be really useful to get intelligent non-expert eyes on your work. So that can sort of do two birds, one stone. And again, as another thought experiment, so I was a little ahead of myself with a thought experiment. What you might do is just go to the solicitation and see what the solicitation does to your topic if you just take the context and constraints of the limit of the solicitation and let them frame your project for you. Again, you of course don't have to land there. Your work is your work. But what might come of just trying on that framing and learning from it? So with that, I'm going to hand this next section of the presentation over to Hannah, and she's going to take us through Pivot and Foundation Directory as jumping off points for a kind of more creative approach to searching for external funding sources across the whole internet.
Thanks, Andrea. And anyone, please feel free to put questions in the chat as we're going, or also now it's a good time because we're going to shift to sort of a more hands-on tool-based demo. So if anyone has more conceptual questions, we're happy to take them now and or at the end as well. And I can't see anyone else, so just come off mute because of the screen share. Okay, I'll keep going for now, but feel free to jump in at any point. So places to start the search. I know it can feel daunting and overwhelming, especially when the news cycle already feels daunting and overwhelming. So having to go search for funding that feels maybe politically in some way or motivated, it's a lot, but we do have resources for you. So you are not starting from scratch. We are going to talk about ways that just general Google internet searches can be valuable. But I think starting in some of these more concrete spaces is helpful. We will share these PowerPoint slides with you, so you will get all of these links later. So our website, the FRDO website, has a whole selection of links. It actually has a link directly to Pivot. It has a link directly to the Foundation directory, so you can get to some of these places from our website. We also have some pre-existing searches on Pivot shared on there, and I will show you that briefly in a minute. And state funding opportunities. So that's a really great first starting spot. Pivot is a comprehensive grants database that we subscribe to through the university library. So anyone at UNM has access, and I'm going to do a demo of some key takeaways about what Pivot can do for you in a minute. Similarly, the Foundation directory is a grants database focused more on private funding. It's a little less useful specifically for research projects. It tends to be more programmatic funding, but again, can be a helpful frame to get a sense of who is funding what, who's interested in a certain field, and then go from there. Impact UNM is a really exciting program that the UNM Foundation runs, and it is a crowdfunding platform. So think GoFundMe style, but it allows people to give tax-deductible gifts. And the folks who run this at the UNM Foundation are incredibly knowledgeable and helpful and will help you frame your fundraising goals. They will help you with email outreach. It's really great. So I highly recommend that. And especially that is a space where you might be able to get a piece funded that is maybe not a top priority for federal funders at the moment. We also have internal funding opportunities that the Office for the Vice President for Research funds, the RAC Senate, Faculty Senate grants, the We Are One FAST, We Are One PERC, which is for equipment, and those are listed on the Office for the Vice President for Research's website. So I recommend checking that, and they are also sent out over the PI listserv. GuideStar, again, less immediately useful on the day-to-day, but it is deep dive information about NGOs, including like how much their executive directors are compensated. So if you're nosy, GuideStar is delightful, but it also can give you a good sense of who's being funded what, and especially if you're doing more community-based projects in New Mexico, you can look up who's funding the nonprofits that are doing similar work to you. So if your work can might be more direct service related, GuideStar is a good source of information. And finally, the New Mexico Grant Makers Directory is focused on private funding. Its strength is local funders, so like small family foundations that really only fund projects in New Mexico, but it does also include up to national private funders, but it will be strongest on regional funding. And with that, I'm actually going to stop sharing the slides and we'll do a little bit of a demo on my screen. Give me 1 second to get my screen organized.
And Hannah, while you're getting that organized, we got a really great question in the chat. One of the frustrating things is that we don't know what words are coded as non-starters. The concern is that we work on a proposal and waste time because the forbidden word list is not clear. How would you handle this concern? So just something to keep in mind over the next bit of your demo, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk about this. Again, this is all very new territory. This has not been a problem in the past. So we are all addressing this together. I will say from interactions with NSF program officers and seeing UNM continue to get NSF awards recently, the like pure keyword search was partly to get statistics about proposals early on. They are still being reviewed by panels of your peers, and they are being read in context. And so I do think there is a little bit less of the like pure AI-driven control F search for just keywords and more bigger picture contextual questions. That said, they are deprioritizing funding in a lot of spaces. And so whether you get rid of a certain word or not, like if your work is about broadening participation in STEM for like Hispanic students, that is not going to be something that the feds are going to fund. I don't know, Andrea or Betsy, Hannah, anyone else on the call feel like they are navigating this well and want to share how you're handling it?
I would just say, I think Betsy's going to have wiser words here potentially, but not to put you on the spot, Betsy, but What I do want to underscore is the concern in your question was about wasting time. We don't want you to waste your time either. We know how valuable it is and how stretched you all already are. And one of the things that we're trying to do is pay a lot of attention to these changes from day to day so that we can give you the best advice possible. So if you have questions or concerns about any of this, please reach out either to the Faculty Research Development Office or to your college or unit's Faculty Research Support Officer. We'll give you as much guidance as we possibly can. We don't want you spending many, many hours rushing in unproductive directions either.
One other, and this presentation was a presentation I gave, but on the website that Advance has kindly put together for this series about diversifying funding, we did do a presentation on the updated, it's the NSF priorities, but it is, I think the NSF is behaving similarly to the rest of the federal funding opportunities. And that presentation does go through what topics they are interested in and what topics are not, sort of how to parse a little bit what is allowed and what isn't, what groups of people you can talk about and what groups you can't talk about. So hopefully that could potentially be a little bit helpful as well.
I will say in my world, which is the private foundation, corporate, and organization world, I don't know if things are simpler, but our overarching rule is we write for the funder. We answer the funder's questions. We include information that represents the university related to the funder's interests. And some of our foundation proposals are extremely specific in outlining our university DEI policies and our student demographics. And so, of course, they're not theoretically subject to all of this federal stuff going on. And then we have other funders that have backed away maybe from asking from some of that demographic information. So we are the university that we are. We serve and represent the people that we do. And I'm really proud of that. And as I said, in my world, maybe it's a little bit easier to not have to worry quite so much about those keywords because our funders guidelines will kind of like tell us how to write and what information to include. I don't know that that's necessarily helpful for the feds, but yeah, my world's a little easier to navigate right now.
Which is part of why we are doing these. And our last presentation was on foundation funding. So you can find the recording of that on the same site that I just linked as well. All right. So hopefully this will work. Are you seeing Pivot?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Hannah. All right. So this is Pivot. It is a database. A number of you said that you already use it for finding funding, but a number of you didn't mention it. So I'm going to do a brief walkthrough. It is decently there is a search bar at the top. You could just go in and type a keyword, a search right there, and you would start getting results right away. So it is user-friendly in that way, but there are some additional functionality that might not be as obvious to begin with. So the first thing to note is that it does have this homepage with a graph of funding by keyword and field. And so these are all keywords that the Pivot employees or algorithm, I'm not sure, I think some combination, apply to any funding solicitation that they have. And they have most federal funding, a lot of private funding, and a little bit less state funding on here. They are very much, Pivot is really research focused. So if you, again, are doing a project that might be deemed more like programmatic or outreach focused, and less easily defined as research, you might not want to use pivot as much, although it can still be a useful starting point. But it just has fewer opportunities like that. So you can sort of see if we're in the sciences over here, then there's environmental sciences, and then how is that broken out into pieces of the pie? So this is even just a helpful place to see what is getting funding. And some of it is obvious, right? So STEM and health and medicine are the bigger pieces of this puzzle than humanities are one of these small ones, arts and humanities combined. But within any one of these, you can say like, okay, design arts is getting more funding. So this is another place to maybe think about, can you pivot your work a little bit into one of these pieces of the pie that has a little bit more in it? In terms of keyword searches, you can go ahead and type in anything here. So I was looking up literacy earlier and I misspelled it, which is embarrassing. And that will search every piece of a solicitation or of the listing here. So it will look in, so this has literacy in the title. So it searched the title, it searched the website, it searched the funder's name, and it's looking for literacy in the abstract as well. So that will just be, that will cast sort of the broadest possible net. If you want to make the net a little bit narrower, you will want to search by keyword. And so literacy probably still is a keyword. Yes. And it's here under a couple, it's all under education, but it's under a couple different places. So computer education or literacy, so that's computer literacy, so that's slightly different, or media literacy. So you can get a sense of how Pivot is using these terms and then think more creatively about how you can use them. And that will search anything that they have tagged with the keyword literacy. So that's a much smaller list. That's only 53 results. And so it's helpful to sort of zoom in and out. And if you start somewhere and say, okay, this is tagged with literacy as one of the keywords, what are other keywords that this one has? So educational research and language arts. So yeah, language arts is a very 90s term. I would not have thought to use that as a search term, but it is really valuable to know that they are tagging things with that term. And then you can start over and look at what is tagged with language arts. And maybe that will actually be closer to what you are trying to research and study. It does have, sometimes it will have see similar opportunities. So it will point you to another group of related, oh no, yeah, see more opportunities like this. And so this, again, is sort of letting the algorithm direct you a little bit. So this expanded it back out from 53 to 557 results. And I'm not totally clear what criteria they use to say that something is an opportunity like this. But perhaps it is that combination of all three keywords rather than just a single keyword, but that can be useful. This search bar on the left is a filter view for the results that are already up. So it doesn't change your fundamental search, but you can say, okay, I only want to see ones that are clinical studies, for example, or ones that are under psychology. So you can further filter from there. Other helpful places is if you do advanced search. These are you can search by some of the pieces of a proposal that Andrea was talking about earlier. So for example, you could search by funding type. And so if you're at the stage where you've already written something, you've already produced something, and now you want to share it or disseminate it, you can search just for conferences, events, or seminars, or specifically for publication or dissemination. Or travel, right? So those might get you opportunities that are more related to dissemination. You can also search by citizenship. So if you are not a United States citizen, in many cases that doesn't matter because UNM is the recipient of the award, but there are a few types of grants where either it goes to an individual and that might matter, or it comes to UNM and there is some restriction. So you can put in where you are a citizen, but then also include unrestricted or unspecified. Activity location and applicant location are separated out, which is really valuable. So you could be doing work in South Africa, but say that you are based at a US institution. And so that will get you opportunities for both. What this doesn't, it's useful for getting a sense of what there is. And you can, if you get a really good query created, you can save it and have it send you a weekly update. And so it will add anything new that matches that list. So on the FRDO website, we have created a couple of these by sort of overarching field. So architecture and planning, education, engineering, fine arts, humanities. So if I click on architecture and planning, we have already added in a bunch of keywords, and we have restricted the location to, say, funding that is for institutions based in the United States or that are not specified. And so this is also a place you can refine these existing searches that we've created for you and use that as a jumping off point and then save it. And it will send you a weekly update with anything new that has been added to the website in the last week that matches this search. And so that might help where you don't have to do sort of as much of the work yourself to get it going. Note that if it says limited, that means that there's a limited number of spots per university. And so we run limited competitions or per department. Sometimes in that case, I think the Graham Foundation is actually limited at the department level. So that's just another thing to flag. You can reach out to FRDO if you're ever not sure about eligibility or qualifications, and we can let you know how that works. Another helpful thing is that it has profiles. And so this is based on individual people. It does data scrape from other parts of the internet. So you might have a profile on here that you are unaware of. So FYI, you probably have a profile on here. I'm going to use Hannah Torres, the director of our office, as an example, if you don't mind, Hannah. I'm going to take her silence as she doesn't mind. So thank you. So you can have it search just within UNM or outside institutions as well. And you can search by topic or keyword for people as well. So you can look up someone in your field who you admire. I saw in the chat earlier that a lot of people said that they talk to colleagues or base funding searches on like digests from your professional organizations. So you can look up someone who has and who is in your field, whose work you like, and see where they have gotten funding. So some of this, I think Hannah has actually updated hers on here because this is what we do, but it also would have pulled from her departmental website, even if she hadn't added things. And it can list publications. And in this case, it just has one grant listed. So this is not the only grant that she has received. So this is not a like ultimate source of truth type of search. It is, again, like a starting point to see like, okay, what does this capture that someone's gotten? They definitely have gotten other grants as well that are not captured here. Similarly, there is an awarded grant section. And so this you can search by funder or again by keyword. So I don't know, climate change. And I think this is really helpful. It shows sort of top funders that for abstracts that include the terms climate change. Again, obviously for NSF, there's a deprioritization of this topic now. So this is historical information that might be slightly less, but you can see, yes, 2025, 12 grants, 2024, 168. So that's a real clear picture of the direction things are going for this field. But you can see who has gotten them, what are the topics that are being funded. Again, this is not comprehensive. If you know that a funder funds something in your field, like the NSF abstracts are going to be better than what's on here, but this cuts across funders, and so it can be a really useful place to start. And we always recommend that, like, if you are seeing things that are useful here, that you then actually spend some time on the website for the organization. So let's say this one, it will, oh, so this tells you institutions that have gotten funding from this organization. But so then take the information you get here out into a Google search and look at what else they fund, right? So I think sometimes people feel like they have to get the perfect search put together within Pivot. And the better you can get that query so that the weekly emails actually are useful for you, the better. Like, that's going to benefit you in the long run. But once you're getting that list, you need to take it out into the world and see what else. So this organization has multiple open opportunities, and this is a European funder, so this might not actually be as relevant, but there are things like there's postdoctoral fellowships. So maybe you were looking for funding for yourself, but perhaps you could get the work done if you were able to have a postdoc do some of that research for you. So maybe that's a way around finding some funding, that like there isn't something that fits your needs exactly, but could you hire a postdoc to do some of that work? You can also search by funder in here. Yeah. And then the other one that we were going to talk about, which is also linked from our website, is Foundation Directory. And so this is the one we were mentioning that is a little less research focused. It is more focused on nonprofits and private funders. But you can just type in a keyword and it automatically adds additional keywords. So I typed in literacy and it does reading, promotion, adult literacy, and students. So it is suggesting its own keywords based on what you typed in. And you can see who are grant makers in that field, what are the grants, and who are recipients. So that's really helpful too, is that like if you look at the grant makers, you can do it by grant amount. So who's giving huge amounts of money in this? So Lilly Endowment. So these, and like Minnesota. So these are probably, and these are all going in recipient to Minneapolis, right? So you can search things that are only at a national level in New Mexico. And you can also see like who's getting these funds. So a lot of them are going to be nonprofits. So again, yeah, these are organizations that are doing direct service. But you can do a more advanced search and see, okay, are there any other universities that are getting some of these funds? And then go backwards and say, okay, who are they getting the funds from? So it is treating it like a puzzle, giving yourself enough time to be able to follow the breadcrumbs and go down these rabbit holes can be really valuable. I highly recommend, if you're writing down the keywords somewhere that are working for you. And this is, I mean, you all are researchers, you know how to do Google searches, but just thinking about, I did one that was grant support for childhood literacy. And these tended to be going for like K through 12 schools. It was less on research. So then adding in grants, childhood literacy research to try and get at more of the like thinking about how to make this happen versus being the people directly to do the service. And that seemed like it got me a few additional places, and then you can go in and out of Pivot and Candid as well, right? So if you find something great through Google search, put that grant into Pivot and see what the keywords are for that grant and see who what it suggests are other related opportunities. So once you find one or two things that are really good fits for you, it's much easier to use the databases to then find similar other funding opportunities. It's the like getting the initial search to work that can sometimes take a lot of time. Any questions on sort of the mechanics of using any of these systems? Okay, and I'm going to go back to just two last slides. So we wrote out, or Andrea very generously wrote out some like pivot walkthrough advanced search tips. So again, we will share these slides with you. It's what I just showed you, but some bigger picture tips. Things like don't use a, an, or the. You can use wildcards, so you can use an asterisk if you want to try and get like part of a word without having to find the exact wording. And we'll share these with you. The UNM, they have written guides. There are YouTube walkthroughs as well, and the UNM libraries also, because this is a subscription through the UNM library, they can also do walkthroughs with you, as can we. So your FRSOs all know how to use Pivot and can help you with that, or those of us in the central office are also happy to do that. So again, a little bit more of information about the foundation directory. We will share this with you later. So yeah, some final reminders and takeaways. If you find something that seems close, look at the same funders' other programs. Also, yes, search laterally across different keywords. Look in Pivot for other researchers. As many of you said, you're already doing this. Scholarly organizations and associations in your field often do have lists of typical funders. You can get direct funding from research centers or institutes or libraries if you are going to them to do research. A lot of libraries have smaller travel awards. So as you're looking up the information about the archive that you're interested in, for example, see if they will also pay for you to come visit that archive. And state funding programs, I think as the federal landscape changes, New Mexico, we are very lucky to have a state that is very supportive of research and community engaged research in particular. So please do look at state opportunities. And I think I saw that Tim Castillo is also on this call. So the UNM has an office of community engagement. And so if you want to be doing community engaged research and you're not yet or not sure how or want connections to different parts of the state or different people in the state, you can reach out to Tim and his office, and they're happy to help. If you do get a good pivot search set up, query set up, and are getting weekly emails and it seems useful and then stops seeming as useful, if you are ignoring your pivot emails or just deleting them, that's a sign that it's time to update your search. You want that to be a weekly email that you are excited to open. And the great thing about the weekly email is it is just the one or two or maximum 10 to 20, depending on your field, new opportunities that week. So it is much more digestible and much easier to look at them each week and stay up to date that way than trying to do an enormous search for everything that's currently open. Again, you'll sort of need to do that when you're first getting it set up, but then you can just see the new things each week. We also recommend trying different search engines. I think Google has gotten less good in general. There are more ads and more sponsored search results. So maybe try DuckDuckGo or some of the ones that are less corporate. Brainstorm with friends and mentors in your discipline. I think many of you said you're already doing that. And think bigger picture. So scaffolding funding opportunities. What can you look for now that would maybe set you up for something longer term? If you find a really big award or an award that's only for senior faculty, can you put that in your back pocket and then work towards that in a few years? And think creatively, and we're happy to have one-on-one conversations with you. Sometimes, as Andrea said, having someone outside of your field hear your project described might actually be able to see it from a different angle because we're not as expert in it or as immersed in it. And just patience, it does take time. We know this is a big problem. We are also happy to help with these searches and help you set up a pivot search. We can't do it all. It needs to be a give and take because again, you know what your project is better than we do, but we're happy to help. And we know that there's a lot of change and uncertainty, but hopefully some of these methods maybe open doors that you didn't think needed to be opened because there was ample federal funding for you. So not to try to be overly optimistic when like there are real challenges, but also to say like maybe this is an opportunity to do something different or new and like go out on a limb. And as always, contact your FRSOs, contact the Central FRDO office. We are here to help. So that is it. Does anyone have any questions or discussion? Right. Well, our fantastic partners from Advance who are putting this on with us, Sandy Rodriguez is on the call and will be sending out the slides from this, and we'll be posting the video recording on the website. We have one more webinar in this summer series planned. And so that is on unlocking state and private industry funding as opposed to foundation funding. So that is in 2 weeks. So we hope you'll join us for that. And there was just a question in the chat, is there a way to filter for eligibility for these grants in Pivot? Yes, there is. One of the advanced search options is eligibility, both in terms of institutional eligibility, so is UNM eligible, as well as like career stage eligibility. So you can filter by graduate student, early career PI, later career PI. And PI is principal investigator, scientific term used across fields. Anything else? Okay, well, we'll stay on the call if anyone has any one-on-one questions you want to ask, but otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks for sharing some time with us, everybody. We'll hope to chat with you one-on-one if we can support you.
Thank you.